Welcome to Keyframers, the animated collaborative coding livestream where we bring imaginative user interfaces to life. I'm your host, Stephen Shaw, but you may know me as @Shashaw.
And I am your host, David Khourshid, also known as @DavidKPiano.
And together we are coding compadres, animation amigos, Boolean buddies, and keyframe companions.
Yeah, so we will be starting to create an animation from scratch live using HTML, CSS, and a small bit of JavaScript today. And I say starting for a reason.
That's right. Keyframers is made possible by your support. You can get special shout-outs and other things as we stream by pledging on Patreon, subscribing here on Twitch, or really just being awesome in the chat.
And speaking of chat, if you have any questions, comments, we will answer them. Well, we won't answer your comments. I don't know how you could respond to. Well, you could respond to comments, I guess. Yeah, we'll give a nod to your comments. So yeah, reach out in the Twitch chat or in the YouTube comments if you have anything to say of value.
Yes. Yeah, we're so glad you guys are with us. Y'all are with us. And today is slightly different. What's different today, David?
Well, today we're taking a little bit of a different approach. Instead of creating an entire animation from 0 to 60, which, you know, it sort of reminds me of the whole, like, you know, that drawing an owl meme?
Yes.
Where it's like step 1, draw 2 small ovals. Step 2, draw the rest of the owl. Yeah. So I don't want to do that today. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to talk through basically how we would set up a complex animation. Like, let's say that you were given an animation draft from your, I don't know, super cool designer who happens to know motion design, and you were asked to implement it. So the number one question would be, where do I start, right? You can't just fall back to your normal everyday HTML, JavaScript, React, Vue, whatever. You actually have to sit down and think about, how am I going to structure my application and my styles, and of course my HTML and everything, so that it could be animated in the exact way that my designer wants it to be animated.
And even above the animation, just figuring out the layout and the different ways that the little pieces will feel in the document is a very important part of the animation before you even start moving anything around.
Right. So today we're going to be taking a look at a pretty complex new animation, and I mean new as in this just came out like yesterday or the day before. Like, it's very, 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 very fresh, and we keep things fresh for all of you here.
That's right.
If you want to go ahead and show that.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up here. So this is Apple Pay Redesigned by Michael Sambora, and it's a reimagining of what Apple Pay could be. Got multiple cards here, got a list of purchases down below, it looks like. And yeah, it's just very, very pleasing.
Yeah, so before you start freaking out and running away and saying, I want to quit my job, I can't do this type of animation, we're going to break this down, and we're going to basically be creating an MVP, so minimum viable product for this animation. So in the first part of the series, we're going to be going over the layout and just doing a simple CSS transition, basically organizing our layouts and our styles in a way that we get from state A to state B. State A being like this 1-card view, and state B being this 3-card view. And then in the next episode of the series, we are going to actually make it interactive. So the first step is getting it to animate into that 3D position, and the second step, we're going to be talking about using libraries such as Hammer.js and RxJS and all of that to make it touch-friendly and more interactive.
Yeah. And I have adjusted my mic in I had a comment in the chat, so let me know if that's okay. If it's still not coming in right, let me know, and we'll adjust those levels. All right. So yeah, just looking at the kind of two different states. It's louder. If I'm not understandable for some reason,
just start screaming.
So basically, only two different states here, right? We've got the kind of overview of all of the cards, and then a selected card showing the close-up view with how much you've spent and the purchases down below.
Right. So at first, this is going to be two states. As we get into the more interactive parts in the next episode, we're going to discover how there's actually three states to this. There's the initial state, the transitioning states, where you're actually dragging it with your pointer finger or pinky or thumb or whatever you use to drag stuff on your phone. And going to that last state, which is a 3D state. So, but we'll talk about that in the next episode. This episode, we're going to be starting from scratch, and we're going to be doing the minimum viable animation. So the MVA, I guess. It's not really a catchy acronym, but we'll go with it.
No. I dig it.
YOLO.
All right, so yeah, we'll move over here to CodePen, where we have done 0 setup. Normally we have at least a little bit of layout done, but this time we wanted to showcase, how we would approach it just from scratch.
Right.
So I think the first thing to kind of tackle would just be creating this kind of card component.
Right, yeah. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just, we have a hierarchy of information, of course. If we take a look at the card, we have I don't know, you could call it a UI card title. And of course, you could use BEM, you could use whatever. I'm just doing generic class names so that you could take that and roll with it, just whatever style of CSS you like. So, and oops.
Let's see.
Yeah. And then I guess we have a card number at the bottom.
Yep.
So, we could just do UI card number. And it's just ... 8571, which are the last 4 digits of my actual credit card, believe it or not.
Hey, good to know.
No, I'm just kidding.
Furiously scribbling.
All right, so let's take a look at my opinionated, and it is opinionated, CSS setup. So the first thing I'm going to do, I like having a full canvas to work with. So my body and HTML, as you've probably seen in previous episodes, we have a height of 100%, width of 100%, and that's just so it takes up the entire window. And sometimes browsers add margin or padding, or maybe they don't add padding, but I just like to play it safe and just have zero out the margin and padding. Now, you could use something like normalize.css, which I will post a link to, because it actually was just somewhat recently updated, which is cool because it's many, many, many years old. Yeah, so you could use something like that in order to, I guess, set up some base styles. But also, and again, this is opinionated, I like making everything box sizing border box, just for starters. And that's because content box is not really a intuitive or sensible default. Now, what I also like to do is position relative. And that just, I was talking to Shaw about this because we sort of have differing opinions on this, but I sort of make everything position relative just because it emphasizes the isolated components model so much better, where every single components that you have, every single div or span or whatever, is relative to the parent. Otherwise, the relationship between how you're positioning things is completely implicit. You have no idea when you're doing top, left, or whatever, whether you're positioning it based on the parent or based on the grandparents or great grandparents or whatever. It becomes a lot harder to manage. And second of all, there are many things that will set up what's called a stack layout, right? Is that what it is?
Stacking
It's
context.
stacking context. There we go. Which basically does position relative for you anyway. So if you're doing a transform or opacity or something like that, I believe, then you will accidentally introduce a stacking context. And even if you thought that you were position static, that's no longer the case.
Yeah.
So I just like to make everything position relative by default. And that's actually something that I learned from an article by Chris Coyier many years ago, and I've just done it everywhere. And I saw no one else doing it, but I was like, this is a lot easier to work with.
LaCosta in the chat asks, why not a generic UI root class that's position relative? He thinks, as I do, position relative everything is a bit overkill, and not sure about the implications there.
I mean, don't knock it till you've tried it. Trust me, I've made a lot of code pens and a lot of complex designs with position relative everything, and it works pretty well.
Yeah, I understand the appeal of it. I think I like to have just a little more fine-grained of control, but you can always override a specific element like UI card with position static, and then that would allow the children to
why would you
jump
want to do that?
Because the DOM is not always as simple as you make it out to be, David.
But it is.
But yeah, I am okay with the concept. I'm just not enthusiastic about it.
Which,
right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So far, every single one of our designs works just fine.
In Chrome.
It's one of those things that, you either are okay with it or you hate it. Yes.
And there have been some discussions we've had about the performance of it. Overall, I don't think it's a concern, but potentially on specific browsers or older browsers, there may be issues with the stacking contexts made by position relative, causing a lot of additional calculations where it's not necessary. So yeah, you can certainly do that. One thing. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Chris in the chat. It may be an issue with Angular 2 to 6 because they don't replace their component elements. Not sure what that means regarding position relative, but yeah, that could be an issue with the tag soup. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. I mean, all right. So do this experiment, like on your own, whoever's watching. If you don't like doing position relative everything, that's fine. But go ahead and look at your styles and see how many times you've had to manually write position relative. You're going to run out of fingers really quick. Just saying.
Yeah.
You know it's true.
I just replace it with opacity 0.99.
I guess that works. Anyway, that's my opinionated thing that everyone hates, but yeah.
Not everyone. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up the app shell, and I think Shaw is going to crank out this card design.
Just giving the body a little bit of a different color there, so that our app can be nice and bright white. And then let's go UI card.
I like using outline, by the way, because it doesn't affect, like when you're debugging, and pretty much only when you're debugging. Or debugging, or just like inspecting and wanting to know where exactly your element lives relative to the page. So yeah, I just set the app to 90 viewport height, so almost full height, and the width is relative to that, so 50 to 90, which is about a normal cell phone size. I think the iPhone's a bit skinnier than that, but we'll leave it as is for now. And I'm also going to set up display grid on this because it is 2018.
Oh dear. Yeah. Man. So we'll be learning grid on the fly here. Let's see. So UI card. Grab some additional colors. Do just a quick background.
Right, and one of the reasons I'm using grid is because you see here that there's a we have this sort of gutter on the left side, or not really a gutter, it's just a space between the left and the right, where the content starts. Like I just put 3 rems, you know, or m's if you prefer to use m's. And so UI card, we're going to set, so grid column, I'm going to set it to the end. And so that's what it's going to be.
Right. Now,
oh, and actually we probably need a space for the top 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, that well, oh, okay. So here, let's do this. So when we take a look at the animation, we basically have 2 sections. We have the wallet section, and I guess the bottom section. And so I'll go ahead and make a .ui wallet class, and we're going to put this card inside the wallet. And eventually we'll make a UI cards, and that's going to hold all the cards. And so the UI wallet is there, and then you could resize your card however you want within that. So I'm also going to add a header, and so that's going to take up grid. That way, if you hear weird noises, that's just, it's really windy outside for whatever reason. So, yeah. Grid row 2, 3. Okay, so it's nice and positioned down there. All right, so yeah, so we're basically setting up the layout for the grid. And yeah, I'll go ahead and set the bottom parts too.
Yeah.
Which I'm just going to call, I don't know what I'm going to call it. Naming things is hard.
It's.
I'm just going to call it .ui bottom. You know, we'll figure it out later. And so grid row 3. Did you hear that they're actually going to eventually approve the CSS nesting spec?
I did see a little something on that. I did not dig into it, but
yeah,
that sounds appealing.
Yeah, it does. I don't know exactly how it's going to look. I remember that the original spec, it was a lot more cumbersome than advantageous, but yeah, maybe it's going to look similar to what we do in Sass, and I think it's using the ampersand as well to indicate the parents, the parent selector, which would be good because it's explicit. And one of the downsides of using nesting excessively in Sass or less is that you get this explosion of selectors. And of course, that's not good because then your CSS files, once it's finally compiled, it blows up in size. And when that happens, it takes a long time to download. So
yeah, I wonder what kind of fallbacks will be necessary for something like that.
did you say necessary? My God. How dare you? Okay, yeah, so I'm thinking about the card thing. And all right, so this is what I love about, I guess, position relative or whatever in general. As Shaw is working on this card thing, I'm going to go ahead and nest it in a UI cards div, and nothing is going to be affected. Why? Because he's not relying on position static to like misplace anything or place stuff yet. Yeah, so as you can see right now, UI card is inside of UI cards, which means I could add more cards, and yeah, it all still looks fine. So I'm just going to copy this card definition.
I don't know what I'm typing down here. I combined display grid and display block into display blick. Let's correct that.
I need a good credit card pun. Oh, just kidding. I have Animex and Kiza. Is that not a good one?
I'm good with it.
Oh,
it'll pass.
Kiza.
It's everywhere you're going to be.
Yeah, exactly. So this is prepaid. All right, cool. And so within these UI cards, I'm going to, well, each of these UI cards are going to be position absolute.
Hey, thanks for following.
And by the way, because they're position absolute, you know exactly where they're going to be. Why? Because of the position relative stuff. So yeah, and I guess we could remove the left to, or you know what we could do? We could give the cards an explicit width, and then because when we transform them, we're going to be, yeah, we don't want to have some crazy overlap or something like that.
Yeah, so real quick, just using some padding tricks to give it kind of the proper size. I should probably
use grid.
I should probably use grid, yes, but even with something like grid, how would you say, you know, in this card instance, it's kind of a 16 by 9 or 3 to 5 ratio. How would you enforce something like that just using the grid templates?
Well, for the overall parent size, you know, you could just explicitly set the height and the width, right? So, but as far as placing each of the individual items, that would probably be grid as well. Or we could just keep it as you're doing.
Yeah.
So
I'm tossing back and forth between just padding bottom on the UI card element and then UI card number, position absolute.
Yeah.
Bottom. Actually.
Oh, so you're positioning them absolutely,
0,
which
8.
I mean that also works too. It's like the poor man's grid.
Oops, that doesn't work.
So I mean, yep, totally works. But yeah, we could take a look at how to make that into CSS Grid later if we wanted to.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see.
Not too big of a deal.
Card type. Let's see, 0.8.
So Notorious B1T says grid gap is your friend.
Yeah,
And
I'm not sure how that would help with this instance.
It actually would help. Well, actually, yeah, I'll give a quick demonstration of grid gap. Just I'm going to, while Shaw's working on the card, I'm going to be just adding some stuff to the bottom part, just because we're working on our layout. We're still using UI grid, and I have this UI bottom div here, which I'm going to be adding some information to. And it seems like the bottom part of this, I guess, this design is just an itemized list of all of your
transactions.
Expenses. Yeah, transactions, expenses.
UI transactions.
Well, see, I call it UI bottom in preparation for the fact that once it goes to the second state, that's actually going to be completely different. And so we want to prepare for that. So we could do UI transactions over here. And so, by the way, this is going to be one of our layers. And so we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, so you know how they say avoid tables? I mean, this is a table.
Like just in general?
Yeah, I mean, I was walking around my house last night. I ran into the table. And I'm like, you know, the thing they've been saying about avoiding tables, it's true. And I probably should just keep the lights on. We're going to be using a table today. And that's because we are displaying tabular data. So.
Right. There's nothing wrong with a table when you're actually making a table.
Yeah.
People always try and do all this gymnastics to recreate a table when, hey, the browser can do the heavy lifting for you.
Right, exactly.
Now, we may potentially run into some issues there with the kind of slide in, slide out animation, where the layers or the transaction items are actually staggering in.
Well, that's still no problem because.
Oh, hold on, losing David here. Well. Let's see if he'll come back here. Yeah, I don't know that the transform translate will actually work on the table. What does TD stand for anyway? Table division? It should be table row and table column. TC? Is TC already taken? Let's see. UI table. Add down here. This is the first here. All right, hold on one second. Trying to get David reconnected here. Hey, let's not do that live on the air. Come here. Maybe table data, I think you might be right. Sorry, I'm freezing for a little bit, but I'll be back. Yeah, there we go. All right. Hi, David.
Hey.
Where'd you go?
I don't know. I
Ran
don't
into
exactly
a table?
know what happened. I think you kicked me out for making very opinionated CSS decisions.
Something like that.
That's okay.
All right. So you were saying the staggering of the table items is not going to be a problem?
Right. Yeah. That's I mean, let's hope so. Right.
We'll find out.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Let's see the UI.
Yeah, I mean, if we do the items within that, we might be able to. Any reason icon isn't going to be its own TD?
I guess it could.
Why are you going to force layout into something that doesn't need it? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And this is 1820. Yeah, so we're just going to copy pasta this. Oh wait, just kidding. We need to also add a dollar amount, which I guess. But the dollar sign's in the wrong place. What the heck?
It must be one of those.
Well, yeah, it's important. And then this is just a some icon.
Yeah. Here. Oh, I got that.
It is really windy outside. So we'll just copy paste that a few times. So now, as you can see, right now it's in the completely wrong place, but that's totally fine. Because we're just going to use grid, and it's going to be in the right place. So grid column, I'm going to set it to 2, -1, and the -1, of course, means it's going to go all the way to the end. And so, all right, so now we have our tabular data. That's all working fine. And do we have some padding, or how's that working here? Oh,
I did a border on it, but that's all I've done.
Okay.
Don't blame me.
That's fine. That's a very faint border.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like our animation surfaces cost $60 a pop.
That is not true.
In case you're wondering.
So we need border, collapse, border, what is it?
124. And I think we could use call span equals 2 just to say that's going to stretch 2 columns. Let me see if that works. Yeah, that does work.
What is it? Border spacing.
Cool. Class equals UI th price. And then this, I'm giving a class of UI th A. And I like to keep things semantic, as we all do. And that's a very important thing to do. UI th price, that's going to be text align right. And UI th day, that's going to be text align left.
Is there any reason with these that we don't just do UI day and UI price and then target th and td instead?
I guess we could do that. Yeah. So, yeah, that makes sense. The specificity is bumped up a little bit higher, but that's okay because we're not doing any crazy amounts of specifying. That makes sense.
Specification.
No, yeah, so very, very little specification going on here. Yeah. So let's see. We have that, which is good. We'll want to style it a bit. I think the text is a bit high, or the font size is a bit high.
Yeah, I haven't adjusted that at all. Okay.
Oh, and the beauty about this is I completely forgot about that middle section where it says like this month, you know, all that. So I'm going to add that. real quick, of course. So I'm gonna call that UI middle, right? And because we're setting things up according to a grid, this is not going to mess up our current layout that we have, which is great. And so this middle section, which only exists in, in that view, which is great. We're going to, let's call it UI expenses, because that's what it is, expense. And UI expense time frame this month. And don't be afraid to be like verbose with your like class names, because it's better to do that and then shrink it down than to have like these really obscure class names that are, pre-minified and you having to figure out what exactly those are supposed to be. So yeah, better to be explicit, like UI expense price, and this is going to be just like $1,245. Okay. Now we could adjust our grid rows. So 3 rems, 1 FR. We'll call this 5 rems and 1 FR. So now we have to adjust a few things. So the row is now going to be 4, 5 for this. And .UI expenses. That's going to be grid row 3, 4. So that's going to go right in the middle, or at least it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Okay, grid row 3, 4. Yeah.
You just need to set the grid column on that. See, this is one of the things I'm not crazy about grid, and prefer Flexbox in terms of, okay, I've added an item. Well, now my entire layout is broken and I have to go adjust multiple items instead of...
but there's a solution. It's named templates. But we won't get into that.
Even so, like with named templates, you still have to go into the template and edit and be explicit about, where you want things. Whereas if we were doing Flex, we just have the card and then the middle and then the bottom, and then they would just be automatically sized. Or, we specify a little bit with the flex property. But the amount of code necessary here seems excessive to me. Especially for essentially a linear layout. It's just going one direction. We're not having to worry about, we could just add padding over here and it would be the same as, having that one grid column, or the 2 grid columns.
But what you have to think about is that designers, they do not think in Flexbox when things are fixed. And so when you have a design like this, it's not fixed. It's not Flexbox. It's a very fixed design, as in they're going in Illustrator, they're dragging all of the rules, which are those like turquoise blue lines, and they're aligning things precisely to those lines. And so that corresponds directly to the mental model of using CSS Grid. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could use Flexbox, but I don't know. I'm trying to get there with UI, with the grid as well.
Yeah, I need a lot more practice with grid to see a little bit more of where it's beneficial. It's definitely got its uses. I just haven't fully figured out where those uses are yet in my workflow.
Right, and funny enough, I am using Flexbox for the for the actual UI expenses, just so that we could get all of those in the center. Yeah. So I'm gonna drop down the font size a little bit to 14 pixels all around in the app. So .ui expense price, we're going to bump that up to font size like 2 rems. Oh.
2 rem or 2 m?
Yeah, same thing. See, I like basing it off of a global, just because when you set an M, when you set a font size of an M on a parent element, and that's going to give you some trouble when you try to set M's on child elements, which you don't want to do.
Yeah. So one of the thing, like if you're gonna use a fixed font size somewhere, like you need to be using the relative units then at that point. But if you're explicitly setting a size, like I would recommend using that with rem. So what I've done up here at the top, set HTML font size 56.5%, I believe, is the equivalent for about 10 pixels. It's not exactly that in every browser, and depends on zoom level and font size settings and all that, but it should get you a nice round number. And then for setting like font size 14 pix, I would instead do font size 1.4 rem. And that yeah, based off that HTML font size should be, approximately 14. And you can change things around a little bit. Oops, sorry, you're adjusting that.
Yeah, so the problem with M's, and this has been talked about widely, is that M's are very implicit. You don't know exactly what they're going to be. But with rems, you know that they're always going to be relative to the root font size that you set. And so they become, it's great because rems become sort of a unit that you could work with, and you could use that as a building block for setting the appropriate sizes throughout the entire app. So that's
one thing one thing I'll typically do is set maybe the root font size, like for a component with rems, and then everything within that component would be using ems, so that I know it's relative to that.
That gets problematic though. When you have nested ems, you start multiplying them, and then I don't know. Shout in the chat. Do you prefer rems or ems?
They both have their place.
I think you are to ems as I am to
position relative.
Position relative. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely think that.
Yeah. Chris has got my back on the rems there. Special shout out.
Yep. All right. We're getting a lot of rems. Rem. You should put this to a vote.
Oh, geez. CH. Oh, geez.
Ooh, that's a good one.
What is the CH unit even relative to?
So the CH is the width of an X, I believe.
The glyph is 0 in the element's font. So if you size everything relative to the font size, how does that actually work?
What do you mean?
Well, if you're sizing everything based on 0, what if you have a 0 that's font size 2ch? Isn't that an infinite loop?
I don't know. I don't think CSS does infinite loops. I think it just fails gracefully in cases like that.
It certainly fails.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, viewport width can be okay for sizing fonts, but you definitely need to specify a min-max on that, because when you start getting into really wide viewports or really tiny viewports, that font becomes either unreadable because it's too big or unreadable because it's too small. All right, let's see.
All right, so we have our basic layout set up, which is pretty awesome. But I think what we should talk about, especially when it comes to thinking about the next state, is layering. And just figuring out how that's going to work. Because we have this bottom travel section, and so that travel section is going to have some more UI cards. Or I guess we don't have to. Yeah, we do have to do layering. Or do we? I don't know. Maybe we could just position that UI travel part just right on top of everything.
Yeah.
If they could overlap, so which I believe that they can.
Well, so my impression is that the travel section is actually a just subsection of wallet. It's not a completely different thing, because you see how the cards stack. They're just overlapping, but they're all in one list with that travel section kind of just adding a break in there.
Oh, right. But
So in terms of right now, we can just set up the wallet so that it's over the entire thing, and then work on adding just a travel section into the wallet whenever it's visible.
Yeah.
Know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about how that's going to work with our grid set, because then we'll have to position it absolutely and have it just layer on top of everything. It becomes tricky.
Well, okay, so for the state change, were you planning to use like flipping or anything like that? Just doing handle?
Right. Well, no. So yeah, I think we are going to have. Yeah. So let's do what you suggested then. Let's do Well, actually, no. I'm trying to think. Okay, so we have our UI wallet. Our UI wallet has all of these cards inside, and so we have three sections: UI wallet, expenses, and bottom. I think what we could do, just for the sake of this layout, is just as you said, make the UI wallet expand, expand the full height. And so that's what we're going to do. And so UI wallet. So now we're going to say grid row to -1. And so as you can see, nothing changed, which is good. But that just means that we have here, I'm going to add a outline 1 pixel solid blue, just to show you that is overlapping everything.
Nice.
But that's fine. That's totally fine. And we're also going to give it a z index of 1. So by default, everything is z index 0. So z index 1, we're just setting it on top of everything.
Actually, I believe the default of z index is auto,
which I think might go to 0.
Let's see. What is that? It doesn't specify the.
Yeah. So
anyway.
Hey, let's jump into some animations now. Now that we have just sort of a basic setup, just because we have our 3 cards hiding behind there, just waiting to be
revealed,
animated.
Okay. So how do you want to handle the transition? Just add some simple JavaScript, toggle a class on click.
Yeah. So what I like to do too is like maybe just add a hover, just to make sure it's like the cheapest way of making sure things work. So I'll do that at first, but then if you want to add the JavaScript while we do that,
okay.
We could just switch out the hover, and that's something that we've been doing in previous episodes too. So the UI cards, styles in the CSS, I have it set to transform style, preserve 3D, and perspective, adding that perspective of 1,000 pixels. And that's just so that we could prepare all of the children to be animated in 3D, which they are going to be. And so let's say when I hover over the UI cards, each UI card is going to basically rotate on the x-axis. So if you visualize that in 3D, the x-axis is the one that goes from left to right. It goes laterally or horizontally. And by default, the transform origin is right in the center, which totally works for what we want. And so we could just try and think about how the x-axis rotates. We'll figure it out. Transform rotate x, let's say -10 degrees. Let's see how that looks.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the correct. I mean, it's a little bit too low. So let's do 25 degrees.
Transform.
Still too
Sorry,
low.
I'm breaking things.
Go a full 50 degrees.
Right.
That's too much. We'll do 45 degrees. Gotta love
40.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, while we're at it, star transition all 0.4 seconds.
And then 4i from 1 through 3. And we're going to talk about how to, like, right now we're just doing this just to show you, but I'm looping from 1 through 3 just to do and child specific positioning of each one. And because we're also going to be not only rotating them, but also translating them on the z-axis.
Hey, thanks for following.
And so translate z, and then that's going to be, trying to think, I times, I don't know, 10 pixels, which that's way too close to each other. So let's do 3 rems.
Oh, you're spacing them out that way?
Or -3 rems. Let's, whoa. All right, so maybe not that. All right, so let's just do like 2 rems. 5 rems. But now they're going way too forward.
I don't know about way too. It's a nice effect.
Yeah.
So one thing one thing we could do. Hey, thanks for following. One thing we could do is actually animate the perspective origin. So it's almost like a camera move, or rotating the entire UI card element, a UI cards element, so that it tilts like this when a card is selected, and then when you're viewing the wallet, it tilts up like that, revealing them stacked behind each other.
If you look at the original animation, though, like each of those cards staggers in a little bit.
Oh, that's true.
So,
yeah.
Oh, so I got an idea.
So now you want to adhere exactly to the animation.
All right, so let's do translate y. So I'm going to go back to like for -4, so that it just keeps going like back. But however, we're also going to translate y I times 4 round. Let's see what that looks like. That does not look good at all.
Couldn't you just change this to translate y up here? Oh no, that's, yeah, it's not moving them in the space.
Ah, there we go. See that? That one actually does closer to what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
So now we just have to tweak the values a bit. Yeah, we want this negative. And so the negative is just it's going out the back. Like all the other cards are just
right. But yeah.
Oh, but also, like we have to think about the before states too. The before state is the fact that all of these cards are like they're out of the viewports. Like they're really high up there. So what we could say for each of these cards and so UI card plus dot UI or sorry dot UI card. We could say that each one of them is actually just at first transform translates y, and that's going to be like negative 200%. You know, just like really out of view. And then when you hover over, then they come in, and we'll set the staggering a little later. But yeah, negative 5 frames. Maybe tweak this a little so it doesn't tilt so much. Okay, tweak this a little bit. Negative 10 rems. And translate y 10 rems, and then hey, that doesn't look bad.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah, I mean we'll get the staggering in there, but at least you could see. And it's so tricky to, you know, do this in a non-magical number way just because you're rotating it, but each of the cards are rotated in a way that you need to see each of the card names. And so, yeah. So just to review, we are doing a combination of rotate X, translate Y, and translate Z in order to get these cards to fly in from the top from their original translate Y negative 200% position over to being stacked behind the card.
Yes.
And so right now we're just using hover to do that.
If you're just joining us, here's the animation that we are working on. And I played with the perspective origin there to help a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean that's where you could have a lot of freedom there. It's just playing with the perspective origin, playing with the values, and just seeing what feels right, what looks right, but also making things consistent so that you don't have different perspectives for different 3D parts of your site. So yeah, rule of thumb: if you're going to use use 3D in your designs, choose the same perspective. I like to default to 1,000 pixels. It's a nice normal one because 100 looks too in your face. I don't know how to describe it, but
yeah,
it looks a bit much.
That's one of those things. The less perspective you have, the stronger the effect actually is. So you want typically at least 600 to 800 pixels for just kind of a moderate, normal looking 3D. And if you want more extreme, go down. If you want less extreme, you go up.
All right, so while that's being tweaked, I'm going to be doing something manually that hopefully you would do either basically in whatever templating language you're using, whether that's JavaScript, or well, obviously it might be JavaScript. Unless you're doing PHP or Python or whatever, then I mean, that's your call, right? But if you're using React or Vue or whatever, then and I actually wrote a tweet about this, but what you could do is you could add in the inline style as you're iterating through, let's say, each of the table items or each of the cards, you could add an index as a CSS variable to the style, and you actually get a lot of superpowers by doing that.
Where are you at?
Well, not superpowers, but just ways to do things. Style equals -- I, and then you could have it be, well, if you're iterating through like an array, then of course it's going to start at 0. So you're going to have I is 0, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And you can actually do this in the CSS or with Sass in the same way that he did a simple for loop down here for the nth child arrangement. You can actually do that and set the styles that way, so you don't have to have it baked into your HTML. But if you were generating this from a CMS or anything like that, you could go ahead and do that.
Yeah. So each of our table rows, just to make use of that CSS variable that we use, that index variable, which goes, of course, from 0, 1, 2, 3, and just for every table row item, we're going to add a little animation. So animation, I guess, row enter, a few seconds, ease. And then just to do a very cheap staggering effect, you could have an animation delay of that calc there, that index, multiplied by some small amount. So let's say 50 milliseconds. I don't know. Just guess when that happens. And then you could do keyframes, not keyframers, that's us, but keyframes, row enter, and then from opacity 0, transform, translate wide, like let's say 100%. Yeah, and then you can see each one of them staggers in, which is cool.
Okay, that's rather impressive. I was unaware that translate still worked on table rows or table items in general.
Oh yeah, totally does. In fact, yeah, I was surprised at first too, but apparently it treats it sort of as a block. And so like it's obviously like a table row, like it's a special kind of CSS displayed layout thing. I should probably read up on my specs before talking about this, but it does behave like a block in some ways.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Partial block.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one thing I have done here is I've got the class toggle on click happening. So what we can do is instead of
nice.
tr row enter, we can do dot wallet dot dash wallet tr opacity 0.
What's dash wallet? UI?
No. Just that's the state. That's what's open there. I've just got that simple class toggle happening.
Okay,
yeah, we can totally rename that, but just get that in the right place. Transition, transform, 0.6 seconds, ease, doesn't need both there.
Oh, okay. So you're adding it in you're toggling it via the class list. So it's just a all right, so basically we have two states. It's either wallet or not wallet.
Right.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
What if we use a data state attribute?
I'm fine with that if you'd like to adapt it while I'm working on the transition itself. Capacity
wallet. And then we could say like current state equals lapp dot dataset, right? Dot states, I guess.
Yes.
Very cool. And then which current state? So yeah, we'll just do a simple switch. By the way, if you ever want to make a poor man's, poor woman's, poor person's finite state machine, just use the switch statement. So basically you have, when a click happens, you look at the current state. If the current state is wallet. Then we want to switch to we want to switch to, well, what's going to be our other state? We have wallet, and then we have
card.
Card. Yeah. Okay. Card. All right. So let next date. So next date equals card. Break. And default, or well, like case card or default. The next date is going to be wallet. So oh wow. Next date equals wallet. Jeez, I can't type today. Break. Yeah, and then app dot set attributes status date to the next date, which is great. And so this is a trick that Shaw actually showed me a while ago, where you could actually access that data attribute straight from data sets. And I don't know if that's camel case or if it's just straight up lowercase.
Straight up lowercase.
Okay. Cool. Apparently that's one word.
Yeah. No break needed at the end, but it's nice to be explicit.
All right.
When possible.
Oh no, I need a break at the end.
With data set, I don't know that you can set. Let's see. Oh, actually, you might be able to just use data set dot state equals next date, and fix your hanging parentheses there.
Oh, oops. This should be there.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Okay.
It's,
yeah. Otherwise, we're just caching that value, and it's always going to be the same state, which is not what we want.
Yeah. Oh, the opacity is not toggling. That's what it is. I kept wondering why that was just disappearing. Opacity.
Why is it disappearing?
0.6. Because I wasn't transitioning the opacity itself.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, something cool, and I also put this in the tweet, which it's honestly such a fun trick, but the staggering of the row items coming in is great. Like, it's happening one at a time, and it's doing the correct thing. However, when we're getting out of that state, it seems all backwards. Like, if you were to imagine each of those table row items as traffic, going in, it would be like normal traffic, but going out, it would be like cars continuously rear-ending each other, which we obviously don't want.
Yeah. So I've partially pushed a fix for this. I'm just finding the right spot for it. The way I always approach it is by adding a total var to the parent element. And then you just subtract the index by that, so you basically get the reverse index, and it's working fine except for the. You
might have an off by one type of thing.
Well, I think it needs to be elevated so that the TR in the head is, because that one's currently not being factored in, so that might be the issue. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Wait, but are we still off by one? I accidentally put that -1. So let me get rid of it and see if that works. And I think it works.
Yeah. Technically, we should probably do this is UI 1, 2, 3.
It's one of the most common errors.
4, and then total would be 5. That should work. And for some reason, I don't know if it's just my zoom level or what, but I'm getting no border on them after they've animated. Is that the case for you?
No.
Okay.
I still see a border.
Let me see. Oh. Wow, that is tiny text.
Okay. Gonna do some grid adjustments here. Sometimes when it adjusts, like it gets really big and then it shrinks again. It's sort of weird.
Yeah. Close out UI wallet there. Right. Cool. Wow, we've already got pretty simple transitions happening there. Need to add one for the middle section. And just that. And this is one thing that we could address as well. Typically, when we're just doing all of the pieces of it in one shot, we don't really have a chance to actually make things into classes that should be classes. For instance, the this month middle section is sliding up and fading in the same way as the others. So instead of just duplicating those styles, what if we had a slide in class or slide in up class or something like that? Hey, I adjusted those font sizes up.
Oh, they are way too big.
Really? What?
Yep, they're huge, man, on my screen.
I mean, I'm zoomed in on a laptop monitor, and they're still pretty small.
Maybe I just have really strong glasses. Oh my god, what are you doing? Oh god. That's yeah.
I love it.
That's a crazy sauce.
Yeah, I'm exaggerating there. Let's meet in the middle, 1.6.
Are you getting okay? What do your I don't know. What do your animation services look like?
Animation services?
Like, are they on one line? Are they almost touching the price, or are they two lines? Or
animation services itself is on one line, and then there's the 1820 underneath it.
well,
Do you have a very short window? Is that because it might be your 90 viewport height? That's
yeah. So yeah, I have them touching, and I'm wondering if it's this font size 56.5 thing.
Oh.
That's wrong. Oh god.
Gosh, that transition all is so great. Oh man. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. Why are the transitions doing that?
The staggering of them. It might be the transition delay on those indexed items doing it. Okay, so I think what's happening here is you are using the horrible view of CodePen, where all of the things are stacked on top, and then your code is or your code rendering is at the bottom.
No, I have the code on the left and that on the right. So.
That's weird. I don't know why your viewport would be so tight then.
I don't know.
Right. Well, it's looking good here. Let's
okay.
leave it at this.
We'll leave it
for the moment. So yeah, for something like that, that fading in effect, how would you handle that as a class?
What, the fading in?
The staggering in of like the animation services. Right now, we've just got it targeted directly to the TR, but the this month actually uses that as well.
Right. Yeah. So
how would you componentize that?
That might be a trick question, because if you wanted to just have a utility class, like just some sort of fade in or whatever class, that's good if that's only going to ever do one animation, which luckily in this case it is going to. However, when you're doing more complex choreography and all that, and your components might do different animations based on which state they're in, then having that class won't really suffice. So yeah. It's sort of tough to say. And this is one of those, I guess it's one of those things where like either you add the utility classes or you just hard code it in the CSS, and the choreography is just sort of hidden everywhere.
Well,
But
so in this instance, our animation is ultimately going to be tied to the touch to a certain extent.
right, yeah. But right now it's tied to states.
Right.
So
So one thing that we could do in that case, so like looking at the state wallet. I don't know. I'm just spitballing a class here, so that the TR is and the this month area could all have a singular class that's targeted, and then we know when state is wallet, it's going to be opacity 0. As that transition is happening, the position of it is going to be linked to the touch, at least initially. So we could use that, something like that, to eventually target those items and trigger those animations for those items, and then some other kind of idea there.
yeah, but yeah, basically, long story short, it's ultimately tied to the states. And so that's why you sort of want to have a consistent state, or like at least identification of state. So in this case, we have our data states, data attribute, which really helps out with that. So we could see when it's going to when it's in data state wallet, this is how it's going to animate, or this is where it's going to be. When it's in data state card, it's going to maybe do something different, and all that. And so we could control the choreography based on that data state thing.
Well, yeah, but how specifically are you going to target those items? Just getting TR and UI
Oh well, I
expense?
mean, for the table rows, we probably want to give them a class. But I'm thinking, I'm on line 80 in the CSS. Like for example, we have this data state wallet thing, and so just as an example, when we're moving to the wallet, .ui cards, and then .ui card.
Yeah, it doesn't even specifically need that.
Oh yeah, that's true. And so we could just get rid of that. So what I'm trying to show is basically all the choreography for the wallet state goes here in this single area because all the animations are related.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I would do with this is move it down so that we're not having any specificity issues.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I moved it down. Yeah.
Right. So in this data state wallet, we also have the UI expenses. And so Shaw's working on the table row, but we also have the UI expenses. Those move out of the way too. So we could do transform, translate.
I mean, can't we just
Well, yeah, we could do that. So well, actually, hold on. The thing is that like the rows. So it's not necessarily that the rows are translating Y, but it's the entire table, right? So we have .ui expenses and that entire .ui bottom part. That's transform, translate, Y, and that's going like 100% or something. And so on top of that, so this is sort of a compound animation where as the entire bottom section is translating down, oh wow, that's going way too fast. So maybe make it 50. Oh my god. One character. Yeah, so as it's moving down, it's each of the table rows are also moving down. So it's sort of doing this sort of compound thing. All right, let's meet in the middle, 50%. That's too little. I think it has to be a specific amount, because if you look at the animation again, we have both of them moving in unison. So we have sort of a fixed unit here. So let's say like 10 viewport height or something like that.
Yeah.
Which sort of makes more sense. Maybe 20. I don't know. Whatever feels right.
Yeah.
That opacity goes pretty slow.
Well, I've got it linear instead of ease. In this case, it could probably be ease and be fine. And sometimes I'll even do the opacity a little shorter than the transform, so that it's either in or out before the animation is complete.
Yeah.
You hear some rumblings. We've got some intense thunder out here. I don't know what's
Wow,
going on.
I think you and I have the exact same storm.
Oh, jeez. Well, if we get disconnected, we are losing electricity. So, just.
Does that happen often to you? Do you lose the electricity?
Not very often, thankfully. But you know, this is an unusual storm.
Yeah.
Chime in the chat if you are also experiencing inclement weather.
Alright, so .ui cards transform, translate y. Also, oh, you know what? Yeah, that totally makes sense to just have that here too. .ui cards. Oh wait, but they're not going to go past 0. Yeah, everything just is .ui bottom has to be 0. Kill this guy. Or yeah, and so the reason I'm doing that is because we sort of need to make space for the wallet's label at the top.
Yeah.
So which I should probably add.
Yeah.
Man, that either sounds like thunder or you're just really hungry today.
A little both.
And so let's just call this wallet. And so, yeah, just because we have our states over here, we could say that the UI wallet heading is opacity 1 at this point. And so we could say data state equals card. The UI wallet heading is actually going to be hidden. So .ui wallet heading. Which font did you pick? It works really well.
Let me see. It's called Poppins. It's a decent approximation of whatever it is. San Francisco, is that the name of?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. UI cards is translating too much, so I'm separating it from the others. Let's see.
Okay.
UI wallet heading. What font size is that?
I don't know.
H2. So I always prefer to give it a specific font size. Because if we do that, then we can translate our UI cards by exactly that amount, plus a little bit of spacing.
Other way. Little lower.
Yeah.
To the left, to the right. Pivot.
Jeez. That rain is coming sideways. That's weird. It must have to do with the negative translating that's happening for the cards.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. That's nice.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. I dig it. That works. Love it.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening, maybe. Either way. Okay. Let's see. UI expenses is moving a little slow. Oh, because it's...
Yeah. Yeah, after this, I think we're at a good, good stopping point.
Yeah.
right? Like just where we're setting up the initial animation of this. So it's not going to be the complete one because we're going to be talking about the reactivity next time. But what do you think? Are there a few more things we should probably tweak?
I mean, we can style the cards themselves a little bit more.
Yeah,
but
let's give it a little bit of
give some variety.
TLC. Yeah.
Border radius.
Totally do that.
Increase that. There we go. Now, when you have different cards like that, how do you distinguish them with like classes?
Oh, well, I would actually, because here's the thing: each one of these cards has certain properties, right? And these properties are like categorized. What I'm trying to get at is I would probably use a data attribute to say this is a type of card this is, rather than what I call polluting the class namespace. And the reason for that is because it makes it a lot harder to classify, like, well, no pun intended, but classify exactly what your classes should be, or like what your classes mean, right? Because we're describing what the card is. And so class is just a very generic way to do that, but you could also be more specific and use data attributes. Did you use data attributes or class?
I just started doing data attributes. Just doing data card, and then we can.
Yeah, like data card type or whatever. It works.
So card equals. Let's see what those card colors are. We got a gray card. I'm just using the small app called SIP that sucks those colors right up.
Yeah, get some good color in there. Actually, can we use CSS variables for like the primary color of these cards?
Mm-hmm. You absolutely could.
Yeah, and so the reason is because, well, when you select a card, each one of these cards has a specific glow to the back, and that glow is dependent on the actual background color of the card. And so by using CSS variables, we make that part reusable, which is nice.
Now, what's a good name for those variables? Light and dark?
Mm-hmm. All right, the UI cards, just because this is bothering a tiny bit, overflow. Then, oops.
LaCosta disagrees with using data attributes for styling.
And why?
Yeah, give us a reason there. It's a valid selector, and it's
yeah, it's a
targeting.
Completely valid selector, and it's completely semantic too. You are styling based on what it is, right? And I mean, you might decide, or your designer might decide that it shouldn't be styled based on the data attribute, right? And that way, your data attribute purely becomes for the layout, or not for the layout, but for just the semantic HTML structure itself. And so you could just remove it. But basically, our goal is not to pollute the class namespace and just have like a million classes. Instead, you have a nice categorization for for your things. All right, so here's sort of an analogy for you. Let's say that we wanted to style us as humans, right? I'm not going to give myself a class of .ui shirts or dot shirt dot or sorry dot t-shirt dot jeans dot whatever just to like specify each part of me because if you do that, then you could easily say like dot jeans dot khakis dot trousers dot pantaloons dot shorts, and all of a sudden I'm wearing 5 pairs of pants. And I can't do that. I live in Florida. It's way too hot. But the point is that by putting all these in a generic class namespace, there's no natural enforcement of there can only be one of these things. So I, especially in Florida, I can only wear one shirt. I can only wear one pair of pants. I can only wear, well, ideally 2 matching shoes, right? And so it makes sense to have a category for that. So data shirt, data pants, data shoes, and then you fill those in with each of those categories instead of just blindly throwing them all into your class equals whatever.
What is the SAS trick for doing something like darken in
it's literally
CSS
darken.
Well, I know, but in the CSS var, it tries to evaluate that as a string. Is it hash and then the curly braces? Is that right?
Well, I don't think you could darken or lighten the CSS variable because that's not known until runtime.
Right. I don't want to. I just want to set the actual color that's going into that a little bit darker. I don't know what that value should be, so I'm just.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so yeah, Lacoste says, not sure if I get your point. What would be wrong with .credit card dash dash Visa? So in this instance, what David was getting at is you can't have a credit card that is a Visa and is an Amex. Your card can only be one. So just like Chris said, data Highlander, there can only be one. If you use a specific data attribute or any other kind of attribute, there can only be one value for that. So your selector is going to target that exactly. Why? Are you getting some weird overlapping now?
Where?
Over the cards are stacking wrong.
Oh, yeah, about that.
Does that explain a little bit, Lacoste? Let us know.
So I made a position absolute, but I don't know why it's doing that.
You're the way that you're stacking them in the reverse is reverse of how they are in the source order. So that's why they're stacking that way, I think.
Okay, so we just need to fix the loop of.
I'm just not sure what changed there.
The index here.
That's
that's
what we need, or that's what we have.
That's not fixing it.
You can't.
This is why we can't have nice things.
So couldn't we instead do translate zi times tinrem, and then translate y negative, and
So probably not.
Sorry. What changed that caused them to?
So I made the UI cards position absolute. Basically, all I want to do, and maybe we don't need to do it that way, is here. I'll you know what? I'll straight get rid of it. Is that the cards overlap to the right? That's the effect that I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they're position relative, so you can just push them off to the left.
You're right, but
no left. Lacoste, so you can't have data card equals Visa and data card equals Amex on the same element. That's correct. That's the idea here.
Right. Yeah. So there's a natural enforcement to it, and it just looks a lot cleaner, right? I mean, all right, so think about your clothes, right? You could shove everything into one drawer, like your socks and your shirts or your shorts or whatever you have. Or you could have separate drawers for each of your clothes. And I like having separate drawers for each type of clothing that I have. And so that's sort of the same way in your HTML. It makes things a lot more organized so you're not questioning like, oh, which class is for the card type and which class is for the card size and just all of these random questions. So.
You're very into the clothing metaphors today.
That's the first thing that came to my head. But yeah, so I think that this is an awesome stopping point right here.
Yeah.
We got basically everything that we want.
Yeah, let's transition into the section of our show known as Keyflections. This is a quick review of the techniques we used to make this animation. If you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them as we go through everything, and we'll be happy to answer that.
Yeah, and if you've enjoyed watching us so far, please follow and subscribe here on Twitch or YouTube, or pledge at patreon.com/keyframers, because we spend a lot of time making this and a whole lot more awesome content coming up for you in the future. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And also, you'll get a special shout out because we love you, and we love you more if you help us out. So you could find the links below, literally right here, I think. Right? Am I pointing to the right?
About, yeah, because our videos are so small and in the corner.
Okay, just in that general downward direction.
Yes. Yes, Lacoste, we do need a sound effect for that Keyflections animation. I just have not added one in. That's actually a CSS-based animation built with splitting and a few other things, just layered on top as a browser instance. So the actual playing of a sound effect would significantly increase the complexity. But yes, it does need it. And thanks, Chris. Yeah, this is a good one. I'm looking forward to getting the actual touch movement in there. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's keyflect a little bit. So this is again based off Apple Pay Redesigned by Mikhail Sambora, and just a great reimagining of what the Apple Pay interface could look like. And then breaking it down, it's got this touch interaction that we're actually going to continue next time to implement, taking things a little bit slower this time. And let's talk about where we got today, David.
Yeah, okay, so the first thing that we did, we started from the very beginning. We didn't do the whole, drawing the owl from scratch and then boom, there's the whole finished owl thing. We started from, let's talk about the layout of the HTML and how we structure everything. And the way we did that was we separated things out into sections. Of course, you could use BEM if you want. And we have some very specific sections. We have the header, the wallet, which is what contains all of the cards. We have what's under the wallet? The UI expenses, which is right in the middle there. And we have the UI bottom. Our goal is to try to keep the HTML structure as flat as possible. And in order to achieve that, you could use display grid or display Flexbox. In this case, we use display grid mostly because I wanted to work on leveling up on CSS Grid. But as Shaw mentioned, you could also use Flexbox. We won't knock off points for that. And so we set up a few rows and columns, like basically the heading and the middle part, we have a fixed area for that, and then we just give the free space to the wallet section and the details section at the very bottom, like the transactions section.
Yes.
So, your turn.
So the UI card itself is pretty straightforward and simple. Just doing some background linear gradient with CSS vars so that we can easily override the colors for each of them. We discussed just a minute ago doing the data card instead of adding a class so that we could more easily target those specific elements without any risk of overlapping. So data card Amex and data card ISA both have some different light and dark CSS vars, and because those are dynamic and done at runtime, that background linear gradient is updated with that. Space Age asked, could this be done in React Native? Yes.
Possibly, yeah. You would do it a different way.
Right. The layout in React Native is definitely different. So there, would potentially be issues there. But for the most part, these same techniques will apply. They just might be applied a little bit differently.
Right.
And then, yeah, the layout of those UI cards isn't anything crazy. The cards are actually stacked on top of each other, and we've got transform style preserve 3D with perspective, so that we can get this nice 3D effect, much like the animation. And within that, going over the simple state machine really quick, we have a data state on the app. Whenever the app is clicked, we get the current state, compare it in a switch, and then set the next state in that data attribute. And so that's what's triggering our toggles, which I'll go over down here, where we have our two data state conditions, and then we've grouped the choreography for those in there. Space Age, could you guys do a series in React Native?
One day.
Yeah, I wouldn't write it off. I have worked with it and had an okay experience animating in it, but it definitely was not my my comfort zone. But I could see a series on that, especially now that there's React Native DOM. That has huge potential there. Anyway, the UI cards, so whenever they are, whenever the data state is wallet, here we're with wallet listed, we have transform and the translate Y, and the rotate X is what gives it that 3D effect, and then they're actually translating Z so that they're spreading out and stacking in that kind of way. And feel free to ask more questions, Space Age. It's fine. You don't have to limit yourself here. Okay, and UI wallet heading, that's opacity 0 and transform translate Y on data state card, but then it fades in and is no longer translated here. We can actually leave off the opacity 1 and make it fade into whatever the opacity would be on it. And then, do you want to talk about the staggering?
Yes, oh yeah. So the staggering of like table items?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just having these fun little circles because I like them a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, wow, they're very big. I put them to Vmax. Let's do Vmin for okay, now they're tiny. Whatever. Okay, it works. It's just a nice little background. Anyway, so the staggering, this is something that is very framework specific. Actually, it's not really framework specific. You would use your framework to implement this, but basically on each of these table rows, we give it an inline style. Now, don't freak out. I think that, and I've said this before, one of the best things to put in inline styles are actual CSS variables, because they act like props for your CSS. And so in this one, we're adding the index of each table row style of each table row. So this one would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Because we start at 1 for whatever reason, but we could start at 0.
The heading is 0.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, JK. Heading is 0. That works. Yeah. So the stagger is actually an alternating stagger. And what that means is that when we look at the CSS, our transition delay is initially going to be, where's the, oh yeah, it's right over here. So UI expenses. Yeah, so the delay is going to be just as you expect. We take each of those indices and we multiply them by some sort of fixed amount. In this case, 50 milliseconds. That way, the first one will get a delay of 50 milliseconds. The second one will get 100, 150, 200, and so on. However, when we're animating out, we sort of get the rear bumper traffic to traffic sort of jarring movement that we don't want. And in order to mitigate that, we're going to be going backwards and subtracting from the total. So instead of it being 50, 100, 150, and so on, we want it to be 200, 150, 150, like we want it to be going down in the alternate direction. To do that, we get the total amounts, which in this case is 5, and we subtract the index. It's simple math. So if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then 5 minus 1 is 4, 5 minus 2 is 3. So you know it goes backwards. So 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Yeah, 0. And yeah, that just works. And so we could control, and this is sort of an underlying theme, is that we control what the animation is doing based on the data state. So in this case, we have 2 data states. We have the card state, where we're just showing the card and the details underneath, and we have the wallet state, where we're showing all of the cards. And in each one of those states, we have the different animations. And the reason why this is good to do is because all of these styles over here are choreographed with each other. And that's why they're all going under the same selector, which is this data state wallet. And that's why you want to keep those together. More often than not, and I'm totally guilty of this too, when you're choreographing animations, it's just, you're probably adding a class somewhere or something, and then you just sprinkle on the animations with all of their seemingly random delays. And so you have to just keep scrolling through the CSS and tweaking everything in order to make the choreography work. But if you all have it in one single area, then it makes it a lot easier, and you could definitely share values such as delay and all that stuff.
And in theory, you would group all of your transition kind of calls and everything here, potentially even having those within the specific data state, so that you could have different ease in out kind of ideas. But in this instance, they're just up a little ways, but there's just one little separator there. So
yeah.
Okay. Any other items we needed to cover?
I don't think for right now. The next episode, just as a preview, we're going to be talking about adding interactivity to this. So as far as a web view, this works fine. You click, looks nice, but we want to get into the more interactive stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, tune in next week for working on this animation even more to make it interactive and fun, and we'll look for you there. What do you say we close this out, David?
All right, let's do it.
All right. You have been watching Keyframers, the animated collaborative coding live stream where we bring imaginative user interfaces to life. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to see more from David and I, there are many ways you can support us. You can follow and subscribe here on Twitch at twitch.tv/keyframers and participate in the live streams each week. You can also like and subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/keyframers, and you can spread the word at twitter.com/keyframers, and tweet at us, ask questions there, share animations you'd like to see made. We love that. And you can also directly support us on Patreon at patreon.com/keyframers.
Yeah. And of course, future episodes, give us your ideas. Either tweet us at Keyframers or message us just any animations that you would like to see made or explained. We are more than happy to do it. You could also present questions or challenges to us, and we will answer them on the air to the best of our abilities.
That's right. And we do have more content coming. We've got some big plans. So stay tuned and follow us on Twitter for the latest updates on all of that.
Yeah.
All right. And that's all for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hasta luego, amigos.
All right. Adios.